Welcome to NAR Fellowship. Today I have Cassidy with me, who is a fellow learner as well as a YouTuber and event organizer, and a fellow member of the broad corner that we're both a part of. And thank you very much for being on the show, Cassidy.
Oh, sure, Valerie. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, maybe you might be kind enough to tell a little bit of your background. We both work in media production, so that we had that in common, so that was kind
Yes.
of fun and nice. But
Yeah.
maybe you can give a little bit of a background about your history and where you are now. You're in another country, which I'm
Yeah.
blanking on the name of, but might be show busy. Cool. So I'll let you l- give us a little brief description of who you are and where you're from.
Sure. So my name's Cassidy. I am an American, but I live in the Netherlands here with my husband and my daughter. And yeah, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. Like I said, I did spend most of my early 20s and mid 20s working in media. Yeah, I got my degree in cinema from San Francisco State University, and since then did lots of different things with media and live event media, but also documentaries and short films, and obviously I dabbled a little bit in YouTube as well. But yeah, so that's sort of the background there. Um, yeah, I originally from Phoenix, but went to school in California, studied a little bit abroad in Australia, and yeah, when I came back to Arizona, um, yeah, did a lot of questioning of okay, well, what do I do now? And yeah, after several years of trying my hand at different entertainment things. Really loving that. Ended up meeting a Dutch man, moving to the Netherlands to get married to him, sort of leaving that old life and kind of moving into a different life of motherhood and parenting and yeah, marriage. And that's been yeah, a really lovely change to um, sort of my life. But that's why I'm here in Europe now. And through that, I've been able to produce some events for sort of the estuary movement um, with the brand Breakwater Festival. We do a 3-day festival every year in a different country in Europe. It's sort of a way to bring different speakers who are kind of dabbling in meaning questions to a place and also gather other people around who might have interest in those sort of speakers. But really, ultimately, what we want to do is not just have people sit and listen to speakers. We want them to sit and talk to each other and have a place to really gain community and, yeah, kind of traverse these questions of meaning without forgetting the humanity of it all. So that's sort of something that has been what I've been doing lately. We have the next Breakwater Festival this fall in the Netherlands. More details will come about that, but we've also sort of been dabbling in other smaller events to kind of help Estuary in other ways in Europe. So it probably will already be past by the time this is out. But in February, we're doing a little estuary tour with Paul Vanderklay to help him get to meet some of these estuaries and help the estuaries there kind of grow roots and get a chance to bring new people into their little local groups and participate in estuary. And then in Germany, we're actually going to be doing a 1-day sort of event. We're calling it Breakwater Exchange. And that's March 22nd, I believe. I'll send you the link.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's the
I'll throw it in the video
22nd.
description. Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, yeah, but that will be a 1-day event. We'll have a couple speakers, but it's really more focused on the local community versus sort of a more international gathering where
Mm.
we'll be really targeting it for the local people in the local language. So those are sort of the fun things that I have going on right now and the work things. But if I'm honest, most of my life is being a mother and, dealing with, you know, babies and well, I have a toddler now and then one on the way. So
Oh,
that's been a whole different
congratulations.
process and learning curve for me.
Aw, very cool, very cool. Thank you very much. So
Sure.
usually what I start off with is a weird question that I came up with, and some people have interesting ideas of how to answer it. There's no wrong way to answer it. Even I don't know is fine. Um, uh, the question is, what was your learning journey like? some people mention memories that stood out that kind of pivoted them a certain direction, like college or something like that. Other people have like a little self self learning journey that they, maybe they've always been interested in writing at, how that started and what they learned and how they grew and stuff like that. So how you want to answer it is totally up to you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I feel like my learning journey has been all over the place. I mean, I feel like in some ways, from the minute you're born to like the minute you die, you're always learning, right? Whether it's sort of institutionalized or not. And I think I kind of grew up in a family culture where, like learning was just embedded in how you live. So,
Ah,
my mom's always teaching me, you know, she's always wanting us to read, teaching us how to count, teaching us how to clean, teaching us all these things, teaching us how to cook. Like there's all these little things that it wasn't like, oh, I'm learning, but it was always just sort of built in my everyday that it became sort of natural. And then sort of when I got into more institutional learning, when you're going to school, for the first little while, I really liked it. And then from like the fourth grade to probably the end of high school, I kind of hit this apathetic stage for a variety of reasons that I won't get into now, but kind of to this place where I didn't really want, like, not that I didn't want to learn, I guess, but it just was something I kind of avoided. And I phoned it in. I did the bare minimum that I could to get through the classes, but just wasn't that there was something, there's lots of things in my life that were making it so that that kind of sense of wanting to really concentrate and learn and do the hard work to learn in the settings that I was in was not something I was being very diligent in participating in to the chagrin of my parents.
oh,
But yeah, I think that slowly changed once I kind of got towards the end of high school and into college. And yeah, for a lot of reasons, all of a sudden I had this like real interest in learning. And I think part of that was sort of the structure of it. I went from sort of like a structured 7 period class where you're in school all day. And then once I went into half days in my last year of college or high school, that became easier for me to like, oh, learn and things. And then all of a sudden you go to college and you have classes 3 days a week, and you get to pick your classes and you get to choose what you learn. I think that learning style of the different structure of it made it easier. There was one year way back when I was younger, I actually did get 1 year of being homeschooled, and that didn't go very well
aw,
for a variety of reasons as well. But I'm very social. So I think the way that we had the homeschooling, it was sort of like me and my younger sister sitting at a coffee table doing workbooks. And
oh,
so it was it was tough for us. It was tough for my mom. Nobody liked it. So we went back to school after that. And then yeah, that was probably just a little bit before I started hitting this sort of rough patch of being really apathetic to learning. But then in college it sort of switched and I got really interested in learning and yeah, kind of just enjoyed the process of it and tried a little bit more. It wasn't like I was doing all of my homework in the class before the class that the homework was due. It was like, oh yeah, taking my time and really trying to um, find a way to make it fun, which I think made the whole learning process better when you actually enjoy doing it, when you're not being dragged along through it or trying to avoid it. It makes it easier. And then yeah, obviously I was doing that sort of on this institutional level. When I started college, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, but eventually came to the place where I was like, okay, I want to work in media. I want to do video stuff. So got my degree in cinema. If I look back now and think, okay, career-wise, what would have been better? Me just going and working on the ground from the beginning, or going to college and doing this thing, which would have made a better sense for like a career trajectory. It was probably the former of like, hey, just go and work. But I think for me, because I had that weird apathetic stage, having that college structure and having that sort of forced way of learning in the American system in that college frame was really helpful for me and good for me. So I'm really glad that I went to college. But sort of towards the end of my college, I started having a lot of questions about like faith, religion, big meaning questions. And that became a different kind of learning for me where I was, finishing up my degree in this like arts world, filmmaking, while going online and basically getting my degree in YouTube University, trying to get my hands on anything that I could to figure out, okay, what's this conversation? What's going on with like these big questions, philosophy, religion? How do you engage well with these things? And there are probably a lot of ups and downs with that, a lot of good and a lot of bad. But that has been, I think, probably a lot of learning that I've done sort of in the last decade of sort of the questions that um, I find the most meaningful to kind of dig through and learn, because I think it has so much impact on everything else that you do, of like these kind of bigger worldview philosophical structural questions have so much impacts implicitly in how you live, and having a sense to kind of dig into those has been fun and beautiful as I orient in the world. But I think it was really helpful that I had sort of this hands-on media training as well, because it was sort of like pairing the physical work of the art form that I was in with this intellectual exercise of trying to understand how do I get to good answers about the things that I hold
Mm.
most sacred, right? And so those things together, I think, helped balance me out in a way that might not have happened if I was in a strictly like, I wanted to get my degree in philosophy or what have you. There was something about that balancing of the physical activity and the creative um, mindset you have to be in media creation to kind of tackle these kind of bigger, more esoteric questions. Um, so that's sort of been like a kind of more independent thing that I've never really like. I would say I'm a layman in all of those questions, but I have such an interest in those questions. I find them really fascinating. And then somewhere along the way between that, after college, I did some education with real estate investment and that sort of thing, more on a, like I took courses, but it wasn't like an institution or anything. I just really wanted to kind of learn that side of it, because I thought it was really helpful to kind of figure out, okay, well, how's some ways you can get passive income to help you kind of have stability as you're kind of swinging the fences at these crazy like entertainment career, which is pretty much Vegas.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of predicting what's really gonna go well or not. So
Yeah.
I did a little bit of that, and then like I said, I met my husband and I moved to the Netherlands. And so the last couple years have been a lot more of like learning how to integrate into a new culture, integrating into a new language, learning how to be a mom. And so there's all these things that are also learning, but not in an institutional way.
Mm.
And so that's sort of been my life now. So a lot of those other questions that all came before, the media stuff, the religious stuff, even the real estate stuff, they're around my life and they still percolate. But a lot of my learning now has kind of trickled down into a lot more practical things and kind of figuring out not how do I teach myself, but how do I teach others, particularly my children. Like, how am I going to do well to teach them, and how do you take on that mantle really well? So I think that's probably a good sort of
That's a
grand arch of the learning.
that's
I don't know if you have any follow-up questions or
I do have some follow-up questions. The just out of curiosity, because I know there's different types of film schools and stuff. Some are very practical, like the one my brother and I went to. Were very practical, um, technical oriented. They didn't teach a lot of film theory and or the big mean,
right.
humanities and so forth. There
Yeah.
was one class that we took that was about film history, and that was really great. We both enjoyed
Mm.
that. It could have used more comedy than it. It was very much drama
Yeah,
oriented. But
always.
yeah, but did you have any like deeper meaning classes in the film school, or was it very much hands-on trying to learn how to do the technical, practical business side of stuff?
Yeah, so it was kind of a mix. So I my education journey was the most unconventional. I think
Oh,
particularly because I kind of checked out towards like a good chunk of the middle, like adolescent years of schooling. There was this sense of like, I don't even want to take the SAT. I don't want to try to go to a university. I'm just going to go to a community college and I'm going to figure it out. And I think there was a little bit of a negative bias to that
mm,
in the kind of learning environment that I was in, where it was sort of like, oh, community college, it's like a lesser thing. You want to go to the university and like, but
right.
I was just sort of like, I was just checked out. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go to the community college. I don't care. And for me, it actually ended up being a really lovely thing because it gave me a chance to really figure out what I wanted to do. The classes ended up being cheaper. I actually tested into a scholarship there. So
Cool.
the first 2 years were completely free for me, which would not have been if I went to a university.
Right.
And so from there, I kind of did my basic kind of core classes. So I didn't do a lot of film classes. I did some because I was just always interested in, film making, and you got to take history courses. So why not take a film history class? But then eventually, when I decided, okay, I want to pursue this film thing, I ended up going to San Francisco State University. And there I did a lot of um, film theory. Like most of my education there at San Francisco State was a lot of film theory and education, where you're really learning about how to make a movie without ever grabbing a camera. You're just watching a lot of films, you're learning about the different techniques, you're learning about lighting. And I messed around with filmmaking like in in my backyard, in my basement, just for fun, just because I liked making things with my friends. And it wasn't until I kind of got later where I started trying to take it a little more seriously, even when it was sort of like, okay, I'm still going to make movies in the backyard with my friends. But as far as school at San Francisco State, it was a lot of theory. And then when I went abroad to do my last year in Australia, that was all practical,
Mm,
almost fully so, to the point where it was sort of like, okay, go go make a film, and that was that. And you're just like, okay, you're just thrown in the deep end, and you got to say, okay, I have to take all of the stuff that I learned and figure out if I even like doing this thing that I've spent, all of these years building up to. And thankfully, I loved it. I just fell in love with it. Even, yeah, the first short film that I made, like a real short film, I would say, where you had crews and serious equipment and all those things. The process was a disaster. It
aw,
was absolutely a mess. We
yeah,
um
yeah.
we did not have fun on the set, but I remember after we finished filming, just being home completely exhausted after everything went wrong, and I went, "Oh, but that was kind of fun though." And so for me, it was sort of like that sense of like, okay, I think I found the right thing. It's not just this thing that I like in theory. I really do like the
Mm,
practice of it. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it was sort of all over the map. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, was there a better way to learn it? But I think for me, it actually ended up being something really beautiful in the way that it kind of developed and
Mm,
shaped me. So I'm very grateful to how it came about, and getting a little bit of isolation and all of those things. But
mm,
I don't know. There's always that. It's weird with entertainment and media because you don't actually need a degree to be successful.
correct.
A lot of
Yeah.
times, it's actually better to just go and make things
Hmm.
and be a part of that. Now, certainly there's some things about being in film school that can help you make connections and like be like a networking thing. But even for my situation, because of how unconventional I did it, I didn't really get that benefit because every 2 years I basically was restarting, having to build a whole new network
Right.
to, make films. And I think the best type of filmmaking is collaborative filmmaking.
Yeah.
So of course you can make films by yourself. It's it's a slog. I don't
Yeah.
like it. Some people really like having all the control. I think the best things come from that like collaborative effort.
Yeah.
But again, you kind of have to learn, okay, now I got to meet people, and then not every person who's good at what they do is going to elevate what you do and make you better,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. And so
Yeah.
you really
It's
have to
very
find
people
the
oriented. It's like some people are really good with the technical, but
Yeah.
they are really lackluster when it comes to dealing with people, and vice
Sure.
versa. You know,
But
so it's like this. You know, it's very organic, and
yeah, well, and it's just so people oriented a lot of ways as well. Like you can have the best sound designer,
mhm,
but like you want to love who you're working with. Like even if they're like really good technically and there's a really good cinematographer, if they can't get along, everything's gonna be awful. And so you like have
yeah,
to kind of it's sort of vibey, I guess, but there's something true in that of like you have to find the people you love creating with and the
yeah,
people that take what you do and elevate it. And that's really difficult to do,
yeah,
especially if you're starting over every 3 years.
yeah, yeah. So, my dad had a saying. He says, "It's not who you know and who knows you." He would joke, "There's a lot of people who know me who don't want to work with me." Um, but it's who you trust and who trusts you.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. And he used to teach filmmaking, voiceover, screenwriting, and he worked in the industry for like 40 plus years. And networking is a big key of it, is learning to network and become real friends with people. And, it ends up being, you work with the people that you love working with. And in film school, it's a little harder, but once you get into the industry, uh, eventually, if you stick around long enough, you end up knowing who's who, even by reputation, and your reputation precedes you.
Yeah.
And so, all the drama of the starlets and the hard to work with stars, that's the that's not the norm. The
Yeah.
norm is people who are easy to work with and people who do their best to make sure the project goes well. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I learned that from working in the industry and then dipping our toe into the academic world. And
Mm.
the community colleges that my dad worked with, both in Denver and also northern Colorado, they had really decent practical um, media production
Yeah.
schools. The one in Denver was more film oriented. The one in northern Colorado was more industrial, corporate, news kind of stuff oriented. Because that's what the kind of work that you can get in those different areas. But yeah, it's always fun to talk with another media person and understand the the glory and the is working 40 hours a week on a good day. It's usually 100 something, and you're grueling, and it's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a mess. There's
it's a
no work
mess.
life
Yeah,
there's no work life balance, and often it's like in phases, right? So you're
yeah,
working like crazy packed weekends, maybe 12 to 16 hours a day,
yep,
and then you crash, and then
yeah,
you don't work for a week or something. But
yeah,
it's yeah, it's like fun and destructive all at the same time.
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
but no, it's been interesting actually being here. I live in a smaller town here in the Netherlands, and so life has just slowed down so much, and it's
mm,
been actually kind of healing to move away from the chaos that was the entertainment world. As
yeah,
much as I loved it and I still love it and have like there are things I miss about it, but it's sort of like it's been nice to kind of slow down and be more grounded and um, not throw myself into the pressure of like chasing those those crazy work experiences.
yeah,
And it's really difficult because you do it not because you feel like you have to, because you love it. And a
yeah,
lot of times it's like you'll do it even if no one's paying you because you just
yeah,
find so much value in doing
yeah,
it. And yeah, so having that ability to kind of slow that down and take a break from that and figure out, okay, how do you still be able to find ways to connect to this thing that shaped you for so much of your life,
mm-hmm,
but do it in a more sustainable way. And I think those
yeah,
are the questions I've been asking a lot of, like how do we create more sustainably, um, how do we take responsibility in those things in all of these different aspects. And I don't have the answers, but I've been enjoying pondering it and exploring it and figuring out how to stay in touch with the roots of those things, whether I ever create with media in like a real professional way again.
Yeah, it's I went to a similar thing back when my father passed away in 2011. Everything just grinded to a halt because my brother and I, we were involved with media because we believed in my dad's projects and we
Yeah.
wanted to help make it happen for him. And so we were like a little production team. My brother was the smart one of the family, the video editor, graphic artist, and audio engineer. I was more the production management, co-producer person,
Mm.
and production coordinator. So administrative tasks and so forth. And my dad was the actor, writer, director. And so we worked on many different projects, film, video, audio. We had a radio show for 9 years.
Mm.
Um, and everything just ground to a halt. And then um, because of my mother's health issues, we were able to get on some programs for her so we could be her caregivers and take care of her and actually keep a roof over her head.
Mm.
And that just going from like 24/7 to like living at home, uh, taking care of my mom, um, and just taking care of ourselves was almost like a vacation. It was strange. We felt guilty. We're like,
Yeah.
but we were relieved because um, and then my sister-in-law in 2020, she had health issues, and so we got her on the program as well. So we take care of both of them. Um, but it really is. I, I sort of miss it like you do, but I don't miss the grind. I don't miss the the never-ending chaos.
No.
Um, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, I feel like I should do something, but at the same time, I'm happy I don't have to do something. I just take care of the family and just and just
Yeah.
like you know, just exist. And then all the writing and podcast stuff started happening 10 years later. I'm like, I can dip my toe in without
Yeah.
it being, not letting it manage, control my life. It's
Yeah.
kind of nice and refreshing. But
Yeah.
um, so what are your learning pursuits personally and professionally? I know right now you're more of a stay-at-home mom, and then you also, I'd like to get into your learning adventures in starting the events as well.
Sure.
So I have to pull my nose. I'll be right back.
No
But I'm
worries.
listening to everything you say.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me right now, learning has definitely shifted into this way where it's not um I'm not learning for myself anymore. I'm kind of trying to figure out how do I learn for others. So how do I learn how to um, speak Dutch so that I can connect with the community that I'm around in a way that's not, yeah, so detached, in a way that's not so separated, and in a way that I'll never be Dutch, but how can I get closer to understanding what it is to be Dutch so that my Americanness isn't so separating and really embodying a community? How do I learn how to be you know uh, a, a faithful Christian for my husband and for my family, and how and I somewhat recently, I guess it's been like 5 years now since I found Orthodoxy, but I moved from being sort of a non-denominational evangelical Protestant to an Eastern Orthodox convert. And so for me, there's a whole learning curve there of like, okay, well, I have this religion that was given to me from, you know, I have this faith that was given to me from basically birth. But now sort of the participation in it in a religious sense has shifted. And so how do you transfer that well to your children and help them understand those questions? And I mean, even just how do you keep a house clean? And it sounds so silly, but how do you really like find the way to not to keep things in order for the sake of not only your immediate family but the extended community that you want to invite in and to like bring a part of your life, and how do you do all of that in a foreign country? That's like a lot of the things that I'm learning. And again, it's not something that you can do institutionally. It's really something that you have to learn by doing, getting the wisdom from people that have come before. There's certainly some book learning you can do. Like I do a lot of like courses to learn Dutch and all those things, but that's where a lot of my learning has been. And so it stopped me from thinking of learning in a professional sense, which is interesting because I think a lot of education in America is really set up for you to move towards some sort of professional goal, right? Like you finish high school so that you can maybe go to college, but if you're not going to go to college, at least having a high school degree helps you be more employable. Or and then once you get the college degree, oh well, that can open up more doors, and it's always this professional like target. And
Mm-hmm.
now kind of being in this place where it's like, okay, I'm sure in life I will have well, I'm still dabbling in professional pursuits, right? Because I do these events, and I run that as a business. And so there are things that are still professionally I'm involved in. But the eagerness of why I'm learning is not targeted to how do I make me successful in life,
Mm-hmm.
in a professional sense, or even just sort of like a grander sense. But it's really like, what does it really mean to be human, and how do I best interact in that for not just myself, although certainly if I can help myself do those things, it's nice, but like for others, so that I can actually participate well in the way that I need to for the people around me. And that's been scary and beautiful all at the same time. And yeah, it's not there is no handbook. There
Yeah.
is no one way to learn all of that. And it's been beautiful to kind of reflect, and sort of bittersweet to see like, oh, I missed the life that I had before in many ways. Yet I would never go back. And there are certain things that I'm like, I don't miss that. I don't miss this part of it. But yeah, having that sense of like that backward looking view with with a like a trudge towards the future that says, hey, all of this thing helped develop me in ways that got me to this place where I can now tackle this new kind of perception of how I'm learning. um, that will be helpful. And I think by shifting that kind of marker to a more holistic sense of why I learn versus just like a goal oriented version, I think
Mm-hmm.
is actually going to be more helpful. It might not like I might not counterintuitively see it in like a trajectory way that you could mark with data, but there's something sort of more whole and round about it, where it's like you look at my life and I'm not hitting these professional goals or standards that I maybe once was trying to seek, but I still feel as though I'm learning in a way that is probably healthier and better.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, kind of letting go of that pressure of like, why do I think I need to always have that to live a full life, to really understand what it is to be human. And
Mm-hmm.
I think especially having kids, you kind of go, okay, well, this this is a whole new chapter, because now it's not just me doing this for myself. It's like, well, no, I have to give them the space to go on the exact journey that I've gone on, and that responsibility is um, like a beautifully weighty thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's been a lot. I've been thinking a lot more of like, how do I pass on knowledge and teach versus what do I need to learn? It's a weird kind of adjustments.
There's a there's a gentleman who's a pastor who Paul Vanickley talked to.
Mm,
It's Redeemer.church.
mm,
Um, and he's a YouTuber as well. He mostly ministers to people who are not going to church for whatever reason it might be. And he just did a video when I'm recording this, just like the other day, talking about different books that impacted him. and one of them was this scaffolding parenting thing. So
Mm.
basically, there's all these different types of parenting and all this kind of stuff. And this book was apparently about the scaffolding that you make to facilitate being a launching pad for your children to go from. And that made me think of that when you talked about that. That might be of interest to you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
maybe. I'm
but it's another book to add to the 20 that
no.
Um, but it was
It's
also
never
dealing
ending.
with relationships and other things as well, and not just parenting.
Yeah.
But I thought of that. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, so that's really interesting because um, trying to figure out how to create that scaffolding for your family, not only structurally and just like how do you keep home, which I don't do a great job of, but I do the dishes. I did the dishes earlier before I came on. Um, but having at least a semi-functional home, and it's like so that you can, you know, invite people over and all that kind of stuff, and then also just function as a family together. Um, but uh, but also, it's like one of the things is even though even if I never get back into media production again, this is the closest. Being a YouTuber is probably the closest I could be to it. But all the lessons I learned, like just in doing production, coordinating production management, I learned about organization. I'm not the best at it. I'm not like the most professional production coordinator, production manager. I did it because I had to.
Sure.
I was the best of the three dealing with it. But I learned how to deal with not only all of the medical and different programs that we're on for to take care of us. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of
Yeah.
administrative stuff you have to do. You gotta learn. You need to know how to talk to people in a way to want to make them want to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like people skills, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like all that stuff I learned from back then goes into my life now,
Yeah.
and just you know, and I'm sure you have that as well as like bringing the organization skills from producing different projects to uh, even coordinating the different events and stuff. I'm going to
Yeah.
take a deviation from the questions and ask you more on when have you done any events before the first event that you did, and what were some of the learning challenges that you had in actually making an event happen?
Yeah. So, part of what I did when I was living in America, I worked for a stand-up comedy festival. So it was like live stand-up comedy events, and I was basically doing video production stuff for them. And so, yeah, I got really taste for live event work, and then, I've been in like sort of community church stuff for a long time too. So there's always a little bit of, event organizing that comes with some of that stuff. But yeah, working in these comedy festival circuit really gave me this taste for organizing events and everything that goes into that. And so when I got more involved in sort of the Estuary space online with Paul Vanderklay, I really wanted to see what I could do to take what I had learned from that field and transfer it into this other place that as much as I love comedy, and I don't want to say that it's not meaningful, but there was something kind of eager for me to kind of move deeper into something that involves a little, yeah, more serious participation, I guess.
Mm.
And so this was sort of that beautiful transition. And I had thought about the idea of doing something like that for a long time, like before 2020. But when COVID hit, it kind of put a pause on everything. And it's like, what? You're going to do a live event? How? Like
Yeah.
that's just not going to go well. And then when I moved to the Netherlands, I thought, okay, well, I think that's just going to be on hold for a while because, um, you know, I have this new life. Like I can't really run events the way I want to in America. But then I met Matthias, and he was running the first Breakwater Festival in Germany. At the time, it was the Bridges of Meaning Festival. since we've since rebranded. um, but yeah, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm doing this thing," and I just went, "Oh, well, do you need some help?" And that just was the beginning of like a beautiful partnership. And now we work with David as well. So it's sort of the three of us doing these little events, and there's a lot of things that transfer over, like the organizational stuff, even film production. There's a lot of like film production things of like, how do you get ready for a set and a shoot? How do you make sure you have all the equipment? Like all of these things that are really
How do you lock
practical
down
for
a
any
location?
field. Sorry.
How do you lock down a location for a
Yeah.
shoot? You know, you got to get
Yes.
all the amenities, and you got to find out, you know, if you have to pay them, if you're not, what all the
How
deals
do
and
you
all the release forms and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
how do you feed the people? Like there's all
Yes.
these things that transfer
Yeah.
really well to what we do there. But it's a whole different breed of event, especially because um, like all three of us organizers, we're Christians, we're religious. But the events themselves are we're not a religious organization trying to make Christians. We really just have found this process of being able to talk with people of all walks of life really helpful for our own personal journeys into our religious faiths. And so having that ability to make that space so that people can have that same experience as they're trying to figure out um, what it is to like live a meaningful life and how to do that really well and do that in community where you're not losing sight of like the humanity of the person who thinks differently than you. That's been, I think, really helpful and beautiful for us. And so we kind of want to be a part of that. But um, because of how diverse that can be with so many different ideas, it's hard to figure out how do you create an event that's really going to be helpful for this process, and where is too far, where is it not open enough, and how do you find a way to um, I don't want to say make a safe space because I don't think Estuary is safe at all. But
Yeah.
how do you create a space where people can participate and feel like they can go on a journey where you can trust the people around you and they can trust you?
Yeah.
And how do you, if trust is broken, find a way to redeem that in the
Mm.
best way that you can?
Yeah.
That's that's a whole different ball game, and so we're always sort of like trying to adjust and figure out, okay, how do we make events that help people scratch the itches that they have in these intellectual questions, but don't leave it at sitting around in our armchairs and talking about ideas? Because
Mm.
that, I think, is what Estuary has done really well to kind of jump over some of these other spaces that are talking about big ideas, whether it's like Christian YouTube or atheist YouTube or whatever. It's sort of like, it's not just about sitting and talking about ideas and arguments. It's about meeting people, seeing them, understanding their story, and trying to make sense of that. And then participating with people and loving people in the ways that we can. And obviously, we've seen a lot of that happen on the online spaces, but we're really interested in finding out how do we ground that in in-person spaces,
Mm.
because there's just a different quality and a more sustainable way of actually living life and kind of having that space to for those who need it
Right.
to find the place where they can ask some of these questions.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's just really beautiful.
That I learned about this thing concept from a friend of mine. Her name the lady who talks about it. Her name is Diane Glyer.
Mm,
Who wrote Bandersnatch, basically a book about the Inklings,
mm,
the C.S. Lewis, Charles
yeah.
William, and Tolkien, and the rest of them, Owen Barfield, and all that. Um, but there's a concept from 1880s called intellectual hospitality,
Mm,
and it's not really about safe spaces. It's about honest, and it's not about tolerant. It's
yeah.
about truly seeing the humanity of the other person that you vehemently disagree with and
Yeah.
talking things through with them. You may never agree with them, but you seek to understand them and have good faith conversations. And that's what the Inklings did, right, with each other. They had a lot of mistakes and stuff, but that was one of the things that they um, they really wrestled with each other, um, different ideas and stuff. Charles Williams was like very esoteric. Owen Barfield had his own thing going on,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but it, when I learned of the concept and I watched all three of her lectures on it and read her blog post and read a couple other people's blog posts about it, I'm like, this is what we're doing in Estuary.
Yeah. I really like that term. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think it gets at the core of what it is that we're trying to do online, whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
yeah,
It's so messy too how this is all
yeah.
being
It's
named.
like either
TLC,
the
this little quarter.
Peterson fear or the
Yeah.
little corner or it's different people have different names and different clicks are in the thing and it's like and there's overlap and then there's not overlap. It's like
I'm like,
people are
just
messy kind of thing.
someone needs
Yeah,
to figure it out and then tell me what I need to call it because
yeah,
at this
yeah.
point,
I just call it the little corner
yeah.
and get people mad at me. So I'm like, I don't know what else to call it. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll mention this Peterson fears just to make some people happy. It's like yeah, like
Yeah.
but
No.
the intellectual hospitality I think is
Mm,
really the gem that I was like this articulates exactly what estuary
mm.
really is about, and it's not for everybody because not
No.
everybody can have like good faith conversations with people.
Right.
They need to be kind of centered in their being of who they are and what they believe in their identity, to not be threatened by hearing somebody else talk about a different idea than theirs,
Yeah.
or something that I am, am I don't mean violently so, but
Yeah.
you know, whether it's the left and the right or different religions or atheists and agnostics against different religions of whatever sort, um, because we actually learn from each other. It's like,
Yeah.
once you can just sit down and just like, okay, I don't agree with you. I know there's deep reasons why you believe what you believe. Can you explain them to me? And then, and come forth all the stuff that you never even thought of,
Yeah.
which makes you a better person of understanding that, you know, um, and not everybody wants to do that, which is
No.
kind of sad, but
Well,
I
I
think
think for
it's,
some people, it's not always healthy to do that. I think
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah, it's true.
yeah, I think sometimes there's that space where you just need to not be there. And that's why I think it's really important to not conflate estuary with church
Mm,
because I think there should be this sort of separation in it where it's not this thing that's we're trying to establish for all eternity that everybody needs to like do. It's like, no, this is sort of like, um, yeah, it's like a type of play, I guess, but like a way to kind of help people who need that thing for
mm,
whatever time they need it
right.
to keep moving forward. And I would there's people who have expressed um, doubt about it, concern about it, and I would never try to sway those concerns. I think it is very messy, and I think it can be very dangerous. Um, and that's why I always say estuary is not for everyone at all times and all places, but we've seen a lot of good come from it. And yeah, I would never try to sway anybody's conviction and say you have to participate, but I kind of take the sort of AA approach with it, where it's like take what you is helpful, leave what isn't.
Mm,
And so it's sort of like for me, that's been kind of how I approach estuary. It's sort of like we're not sitting here preaching a truth. We're giving people a space to kind of think out loud and talk through things with people.
right.
Um, and not just in like, I don't want to say echo chambers because I feel like that's such a loaded word now, but not
Mm,
just in the little space that, well, everybody's already agreeing with you, but like can help you think about things in a different way. Because I think for me, before Esther was even in the map, like on the map for me, having these conversations with people who didn't think anything like me were vehemently against the thing that I was believing strongly, those helped give me clarity to talk through those things,
mm,
and gave me a stronger sense of faith when I worked through it
mm,
than just sitting and talking with people who believe the same thing that I do. Not that that can't also be very helpful, and I think that is important, and that's why I think you have church there, but
Right.
having that space, like, how do we learn how to, yeah, be hospitable to people,
Mm.
not placating, not,
Right. Not fake
not like
tolerance.
kid gloves,
It's a
but
real back and forth kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
That kind of dovetails into my. We've been talking a lot about meaning and stuff,
Hmm.
and you might have already answered this question, but what have you learned that gives you meaning? Is it so you talked about the deeper questions of reality, and more, philosophy and religion and all this kind of stuff. And did the did that happen before or during or after Estuary, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, it's all blurry now. I think it's like
Ah,
it's all kind of like it's been there in all different stages, but like in different, yeah, in different processes.
mm,
But yeah, that idea of like what gives me meaning. Um, I don't want to get dark and esoteric and be like a Peterson suffering answer because I don't think that's the whole thing, but part of that is true. But I think experiencing life and living out the things that I was learning, I
mm,
think that opened me to meaning, whether it led to suffering or didn't.
mm,
Now, a lot of times, I think when you're learning, you're getting challenged by the things that are, um, being downloaded into your brain, or however you want to say it. The things that are like attacking your senses, and it can be very overwhelming and difficult. And I think that's always kind of scary. Yet there's this beauty of like pushing through it and letting it transform you and change you. And I guess I just have this hope that, um, yeah, the suffering that I experience here is a necessary part of the learning process for me, and whatever stubborn stubborn sense that I have in my the not so good parts of my humanity. And
mm,
so yeah, learning to embrace what I'm living,
mm,
I think, has been the most meaningful part, the good and the bad. So like
mm,
embrace what I'm living. So it's not just like, oh, the suffering is what makes it meaningful. No, the joys make it meaningful too. Like being present, feeding my daughter, that is so meaningful in a way that sounds stupid when you say it. Like, it's just sort of like, it's like, okay, you get like a meaning just putting the spoon in her mouth, yet it is like super impactful and beautiful. Um, but it's just sort of like that's not really, I guess it could be a type of suffering, but like even just sitting and watching her walk and getting excited to see her walk, like that's such a meaningful thing. And yeah, I think if we're more willing to embrace and live through what we're living,
mm,
you're gonna have a better chance of like really tasting the meaning here and now, instead of chasing the thing 5 years ago, or 5 years ahead, like back or
mm,
forward.
mm. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into some more practical questions if you don't
Sure,
mind.
go for it.
Um, so as you're trying to learn all these different things, um, do you prefer self-study or classes more, or is it a mix for you?
Yeah, I think it's probably some sort of a mix. The way that my life is now, I tend to more self-study just
Mm,
because my schedule is not my own. I'm always with a baby, or
right.
there's so many demands that are required of me right now, especially as I'm still getting into sort of the naturalization process with my residency, that you don't have necessarily the choice to be able to say, "Oh, I'm going to take a class and do these things." But I do find that while I am pretty, self motivating and a driven person, I can do the self study pretty well. I like I like doing things with people a lot more.
Mm,
So having that kind of ability and that hybrid, but I think having a little bit of flexibility and creativity in that. If it's too structured of a class, I think I could get bored and annoyed.
oh
Like I
yeah.
like to be able to like, okay, give me the thing and I'm going to find the way to get that thing done. But it's there's so many different ways that you can take classes and do those things. So some classes I've liked more than others, but I kind of do a mix of things.
So I have two questions that I think you already covered what the internal and external problems you faced kind of before. Um, but what problems have you dealt with successfully? How did you solve them?
Mm. Yeah, can you expand a little bit more on that question?
Sure. So let's take uh, let's say I'll use media production because that's the one I know, but you're welcome to go with it for the naturalization process or moving to a different country, adjusting to everything there. Um, but what what issues have you had problems or conflicts with, and how were you able to overcome them? Um,
Mm.
Sometimes what I'm really trying to find out is um, what have you learned during the process or before that process that helped you solve the problem? Um, Whether it be like uh, maybe the language barrier that you're dealing with and you're still going through that, and
Mm.
how is how is learning the how what things have you found that helped you learn the language better?
Sure.
Um, uh, it
Yeah.
could be a tool or it could be a set of psychotechnologies, like Viveki likes to call it, that you can take and use toward this problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably a broad answer is sort of like having a good mindset is always going to be helpful in taking on whatever problem comes. And that's not as easy as it sounds because it's sort of like you're not always in control of the way that your mind goes and the state and which your mind is. And there's going to be certain times where all of the external circumstances create a place where your mind is not clear and not focused. And
Mm,
I think it's learning to be patient with that, but also finding kind of different ways to kind of discipline yourself into um, holding on to a story that helps you feel like a problem is overcomable.
mm,
Because what I've learned is that often before you take on anything, the problem is seems a lot harder than it actually is.
yeah.
And yet it also is harder than it seems.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's
That's
that weird
very well
paradox.
said. Yes.
Yeah, and so it's sort of this realization of like, okay, whatever problem that you're facing right now, it's probably easier to solve than you think. And when you get through it, it'll be fine. But there are going to be things that are harder than you imagined it would be. At least that's how it's been for me. And so finding a
Mm,
way to kind of find a good motivation and a good story to put myself in to get myself right in the process of those things, I think is probably the biggest helpful thing in like a broad sense of problems. Like there's definitely certain things that are going to require a more practical solution. Like, okay, well, if I want to um, actually learn a language, well, you're going to have to study, and then you're going to have to find ways to use that, what you're studying, in a practical way. And so you have to find ways to do both. So are you going to make a study schedule for yourself? Are you going to buy a book? Like, are you going to go out and go to like language cafes or something, find ways to talk to people? Like there are certain ways you're going to have to discipline yourself in that. But
mm,
the underlying thing that makes it all easier to do the practical things is that story of the recognition of like, hey, this thing about me learning a language is not just so I can have a fun party trick to pull out of my sleeve. It's like, hey, no, this really helps me um, be a better community member for the broader community around. It helps me connect with my husband in a different way. It helps me communicate with my daughter and help her find a way to live out the world she's living in. And so that's going to be really important. And then, if we stay here and we end up putting her in school, it's going to be a lot easier if I can talk to all the mothers in Dutch versus forcing that language change. And so that kind of realization of like, hey, this is not just good for you and something that will be beneficial for you. This is something that's really a responsibility you should take on to help the larger picture and help you fit into a better participation with the story you're living. And um, yeah, so that's it plays itself out in different ways, but kind of finding that way to like reshift my mind into like the beautiful, good, true things.
Mm.
Um, that's been probably the most helpful thing in all of the various problems that I've experienced through just life in general.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Um, let's see. What are some resources, types of tools, or things that you found that are helpful in addition to the mindset and telling yourself a story of how things will benefit you if you accomplish your goal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I feel like
Okay.
I'm sort of a weirdo where it's like I kind of have to make my own thing.
Okay.
Like there's lots of things that I've like taken inspiration from, but I'm a really big believer in like realizing you have the intuitions you have within yourself are sometimes wrong, but they can be really helpful in really understanding how you're going to best learn. And so
Oh.
finding ways of like when I would like real practical when I used to work in restaurants, and it was sort of like, okay, how do you get through a service? I wouldn't say this is how we do it here. Um, well, thankfully, I kind of worked in restaurants where I didn't have to, but when I was in training positions, it was sort of like, okay, this is what you have to accomplish in the night. Set up your area the best way that's going to help you accomplish that. But here's how I do it, and take what you like, leave what you don't. And so I think just learning um, I think, yeah, it's that balance of like you can go a really long way by learning from other people and taking on what they have learned and kind of borrowing it or stealing it so that you can save all of the time that it took them to figure out that. But then don't just feel like you have to force yourself into that corner of like it has to be exactly that.
Mm.
Follow your intuitions. If something's not working, figure out what will work for you, because that's the most important thing, right? Figuring out how your brain works and how it's going to help you get the desired, you know, the desired thing you're aiming for.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I'm not sure how to articulate what you just said, but yeah, whenever someone talks about teaching or mentoring, I usually like to go off on that little rabbit trail for a little while as well,
mm,
if you're up for that. So
sure.
you actually taught training. Um, is that correct, or was it more like
Yeah,
mentoring of somebody who came in new kind of thing?
yeah, I've kind of yeah, it's sort of that thing of like, okay, somebody comes in new, so you're gonna have to train them how to do the job, right? And
Right.
so I've done that in several different restaurants that I've worked. And then I don't know, I think I've also I enjoy teaching. I find teaching really terrifying because there's so much pressure and responsibility that comes with actually teaching things. But I actually do enjoy the process. And what I've learned is if you can learn how to teach whatever material you're trying to learn yourself, it can actually be helpful in you actually understanding it.
Mm.
So yeah, so there are things that I do of like, oh, like figuring out how to teach things, but I wouldn't say I've necessarily been like an official teacher or coach or mentor or
Yeah.
anything. But like I don't know, I just do enjoy I enjoy learning, I enjoy challenging myself, and I enjoy doing that alongside others. And so
Mm.
just I feel like in my everyday life, there's just been friendships that have adapted that way where like you get the opportunity to like well obviously in work situations, but then again it's not like uh, um like high value positions. It's sort of like okay, you're working as a waiter and a new waiter comes in and okay, they're going to shadow you, teach them what they need to know
Right.
and those sorts of things. And that's still I think a responsibility in a way that you can like train. But yeah, I don't know, I don't get maybe this is bad of me, but I don't get too caught up in like following other people's systems to the dot. I like to borrow things and figure out, oh, that's useful, and try to figure out what makes sense for me, because what's going to make sense for me is not necessarily going to make sense for you. And
Right.
um, we can learn from each other and like things, but yeah, that too kind of strict of like it has to be this way to be the most effective.
Mm.
I don't I don't necessarily believe that's true.
Yeah. There's always these different ways to load a dishwasher. It's like I'm like whoever gets the dishwasher gets to load it the way they want to. It's fine. I don't care.
Well, living with a husband
I
who
don't
does
necessarily
care.
manage
Oh,
that.
sorry.
But it's for me to many different things. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
sorry. You skipped a little bit, so I might have interrupted
I think
you.
it froze on you.
Yeah. Are we back?
No, likewise. I think it froze on you a little bit.
Oh,
It probably
okay.
won't show up in the original theme. StreamYard saves it on yours and saves it on mine, and it gives us both, and everything's kosher in the end.
Okay,
But
good.
yeah. So when when did you discover a way to explain something, and how did you explain it that helps somebody really capture and understand what you were explaining?
Man, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if I don't
Yeah.
know I don't know if I've mastered that. I think for me there's always been this like real interest of like trying to find ways to be clear.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but like I don't necessarily need someone to agree with what I think, or, you know, I don't feel the need to like put on to someone else like what I think or how I do. But there is something in me that really does want to be able to communicate well and like be heard. And so I just think there's that instinct in me that is always sort of like turning stones of like, how do I be more clear about this? How do I make this make sense for more people than
Hmm.
just sort of myself?
Right.
Um, and yeah, whether I've mastered that or not, I don't know. But I think that sort of instinct in me at least helps me try to keep doing that.
Yeah. So, I'm getting up to an hour. I could probably spend much more time with you. Um,
Whatever time you need, ask what you
and
like.
okay, I'd like you to explain a little bit more in depth about the different events. You talked a little bit about in the beginning and the middle, about the estuary event as well as the breakwater event. I'm
Hmm.
kind of curious. I never learned about the history of them. I knew through the Discord server that you were doing them. I was
Hmm.
all for them, and I was so happy you guys were doing them. But I never learned like the backstory of like uh, how did how did you guys start doing them and why and
Yeah,
how's people been reactions at for them?
yeah. Well, I could probably only talk about it from my angle. There's
Okay.
probably a lot, a lot of alternative histories of like how this all started, but I can kind of talk from my experience and sort of um, where the seeds of it came for me and sort of how it's developed into what I'm involved in now. Because there are a lot of different kind of events going on all around the world, but I've got my my hand in the small pocket in Europe, so I can kind of
Yeah.
talk about that. Um, so I think I found Paul's channel in, gosh, it was like 2018, I think.
Mm.
And I just was immediately drawn to the way Paul created, YouTube content. And
Mm.
it's hard to even like, I don't know. I don't like to call it content necessarily because I just he's doing something so interesting that I don't know how to exactly describe it or put my finger on it, but he's definitely playing with the form of YouTube in a way that I think is so interesting. But I really enjoyed what he had to say, and I was at a point where I was still evangelical at that time, but struggling to figure out how do I re-engage in the tradition that I had kind of grown up in, and sort of dealing with some of the questions there of it not feeling wrong, but not also feeling quite right, and not knowing how to manage that. And so a friend of mine introduced me to Paul and said, "Hey, I don't know if you'll like him, but go watch him." And I immediately just was interested in that. And then I eventually found out that he did these conversations, and so I said, "Oh, I want to talk to this guy. This guy's really interesting." So I ended up having some conversations with Paul, and then somewhere along the way, some of us were connecting over email through, watching the video. Someone would, watch your conversation, and then you get an email from Paul saying, "Hey, this person wants to talk to you." And you go, "Oh, okay." So you're having these little like conversations of people wanting to talk to you, and you're having these, yeah, beautiful sort of back and forth. And then eventually the Discord became a thing. And we all were able to then, we've all been sitting on the like flies on the walls watching Paul talk to all these random people who we don't know from Adam, but they have these beautiful stories, and they're hitting on things that you've been thinking about, or sparking something that makes you think differently. And now you've got a place where you don't have to be the fly on the wall anymore. You can sit and you can talk to these people who you've made some sort of connection with, but through this weird parasocial like wall.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I was really drawn to that Discord. I mean, I wasn't actually drawn to Discord at first because I'm not very big into social media stuff and online stuff. But I don't know. Someone sent it to me, and I said, "Okay, I'll try it." And then I eventually jumped into, after a week of not touching it at all, I jumped into one of the voice chats, and all of a sudden having this really beautiful, interesting conversation. I went, "Oh, okay, this is something new. Let's play around with this, see how it goes." So after about a year of back and forth of having these conversations with people, there was this itch of people going, "Okay, well, let's meet in person. Let's not sit and be strangers on the internet. Let's find a way where we can have some sort of like events." I think at the beginning it was sort of pitched as like LobsterCon. How do we do LobsterCon, where we get people together and have these conversations? And I was already working in events at the time in the comedy field, and so I said, "Yeah, totally, I want to be a part of that." And I had talked a lot with Sam Adams about it, and trying to figure out how do we do this, how do we make sense. And then COVID happened and everything shut down. And all of a sudden now we're more involved on the Discord, because you can't just go out on a Saturday night to, a barbecue or a party or a bar. You're stuck at home. And so what do? You go to the online watering hole, and you see who's online and who's having conversations. And you just grew, yeah, these beautiful friendships with people. And there was still always this interest of like, how do we make this real? Not that online isn't real, but how do you make it more tangible? How do you find a way to bring people together? And it just kept not being the time. It was just always that question of like, oh, we want to, every so often people would meet each other on travels or whatever. But yeah, not that those bigger events hadn't started happening. And yeah, like I said, during that time, I met my husband actually through the Discord. So that's a whole nother can of worms. But ended up meeting him through the Discord. Eventually, decided, okay, let's see if this whole relationship thing will work out. And so we dated for a while, long distance, and then I decided, okay, I'll move here, see if we can make it work in the Netherlands. And then, one thing led to another. We were engaged, I was getting married. And so my thought was like, well, I really love the idea of being a part of, this online estuary thing that's happening, and seeing it, be like, some sort of an event, or see something happen in real life. But I guess that'll just be on the back burner. But then maybe a month later or something, Matthias announced that he was going to be doing a festival in Germany, and that he was gonna have Paul out and Burn Powers and Two More V's, and they were gonna do this little meetup, this European meetup thing. And I was just sort of like, hello, do you need some help, please? And he graciously let me jump on board and in some ways take over some of the production duties, and we worked together really closely to kind of produce that festival, and it was really lovely. There was a little bit of chaos with it that I'm not going to get into, but we weathered the storm and we came out of it, and and we just kind of got the bug of actually putting the work in it and finally seeing the reality of what it was to have all of these relationships grow online and then open that space for um, semi friends or like real friends but not actualized friends because we'd never seen each other face to face, and strangers come together and have these conversations and live life and really work through these questions of like, what does it mean to be human being? And yeah, that was really it was really powerful and beautiful. And so yeah, we haven't stopped since. We've had a festival every year. We did the second one in Germany again with the same estuary community in Mannheim, and then last year we did it in the Netherlands to kind of help jumpstart the estuary communities here. And we're going to do it again in the fall in the Netherlands. And the festival is basically sort of a 3-day event where we bring a couple speakers together and they have time to talk. But we also do sort of estuary conversations where the people who come can sit and be a part of the conversation. And so the talks are there to kind of be a little bit of seeds for conversation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It just giving part of something to make it special, to take the time to come out and participate in something like that. And then we try to find other ways to get people involved too. Like last year we did like a nature walk as part of it, and
cool.
just trying to find different ways so that you can get people who are really interested in having these conversations about meaning, philosophy, religion, what have you, but also get it so it's not just a one-way sort of consumption cycle of sitting on a computer listening to 12 different people argue the 10 points of Calvinism or something. I don't know, whatever you're interested in, but actually be able to have someone to speak about that with. And then even deeper, outside of just speaking about these ideas, how do you have a place to live life with people? Like, who do you celebrate your engagements with? Who do you talk about your parenting wins with? Like, who do you barbecue with? Who do you share a table with? Like, that's, I think, really ultimately the goal, to get past the sort of online consumption place and really getting people into a participation space of like, how do you embody this in all the different ways that you can? We do not have all the answers, but we are certainly putting some skin in the game and trying, and we've seen a lot of really beautiful things from it. And so I think we're just overwhelmed and grateful about that, and we want to do more, and that's why we've been trying to do some more different style events. Obviously we're having this estuary tour, which by the time this comes out it'll probably already be over, so I'm sorry for anybody who is interested, but Paul has graciously let us organize a little estuary tour where we can basically get him in contact with some of the estuaries in the different countries throughout Europe and give them a little support in trying to start their in-person communities. And then the second thing we're kind of trying to play with is sort of smaller, more local events. So we've launched something we're calling Breakwater Exchange. And basically it's sort of a little taste of the Breakwater Festival, but it's always one-day events. And we try to make them a lot more local, getting speakers more locally instead of internationally. And we always want to try to run the event in the local language. So the Breakwater Festival is always in English. People from all over the world come to participate in this English thing. But like the first one we're doing is in March in Germany, and they're going to have German speakers. All the estuary groups are going to be in German. Like, it's just going to be German through and through. And so I think that's just really helpful, probably even more helpful than sort of the bigger 3-day event, because it really is trying to give support and kind of that morale to the people who are actually in the area, who could maybe on a consistent basis come to these estuary meetings and participate in a long-term community participation. And that's always, I think, our goal with the events. It's not just to create a fun event that someone can have some a 3-day weekend with that, um, changes their life and they'll, whatever. But it's sort of like we want it to be a seed to help people who feel like they're alone trying to answer these questions, a place to maybe find some people to help them along the way for as long as it is helpful for them. And so, yeah, I think Matthias and David, they run the Mannheim Estuary in Germany. I think they just have done such an amazing job with community participation and long-term growth and like sustainability with what they do. I'm always impressed by the way that they have kept that going and created such connections with the guys and gals who regularly come to their event. And so it was really great to work with them to start. And we'd love to see whatever the festival ends up becoming, doing the same thing for other estuaries and feeling like they have a little bit of a little bit of help in trying to figure out how do we make this something more than just a thing we do once a year. How do we find a way to find each other and help in our local communities figure out what it is to actually live a meaningful life as best as we can. And I think it's just been lovely to see what has come from it. We've already seen a lot of interest happening here in the Netherlands as people are trying to figure out how do we create regular spaces where we can have these conversations and how do we do it that encourages community efforts and like actually like humanity, not just sitting around and talking about ideas. And we've had other people. There's someone in Leipzig who started an estuary because with people who they met at the festival because they really enjoyed those experiences at the festival. There's also someone in Hungary who's doing the same thing. And so we're just we're just really happy to see that it's helping people. Who knows how long we can go. We haven't figured out the sustainability question yet. Like it's still sort of like we're getting by, we're covering costs, but we're not really, we're at a deficit in many ways. Is there a way to make this better? And how do you be most effective with who you really want to help? And that can sometimes get hard as an event organizer because your ego can always get in the way where you're like, I want a really cool event. I want to put on what I want to put on. But that's not always the most helpful thing for like what you're servicing. And so it's really nice to have a group to work with to balance those questions. And it's been really lovely to have very eager, interested people trying to get estuary started in Europe, which I do think is much harder to do than in the US. Be there to support us in figuring out what would be really helpful in what the future of this is, if there is some sort of long-term future.
Wow, that's a lot. Thank you very much for explaining all that. I was
Hopefully it
kind of
wasn't too
curious about the
rambly.
history. No, it was not rambling at all. It was very educational and informative and enlightening and encouraging at the same time. And you're trying to serve the people and facilitate them having meaningful interactions with each other
Yeah.
as they go on their journey of how to live a meaningful life.
Yeah.
And I think that's very valuable. And trying to juggle that with the actual financial needs in order to put on the event is like not everything is conducive to happen. And there's and trying to figure all that out and working through that. And I'm really encouraged by what you guys do, and
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wish you the best of luck. I can't really do much here in Colorado, United States, but I can, give you a
Yeah.
little exposure and help get the word
Well,
out.
luckily there's lots of people in the US doing similar work to what we're doing. We're all trying to answer that same question, so we get to learn from each other. And I just
Yeah.
think there's beauty of like if I'm honest, at the stage in my life that I'm at now, I don't feel like I need to be an estuary or like having some of these deep conversations the way I did 5, 10 years ago. Yet, um, I saw how beautiful estuary affected my life, or if not estuary specifically, just some of that spirit of that estuary carries of like that, what you say, intellectual hospitality.
Mm,
That yeah, I'm just so grateful for it. I want to be able to pass it on and help it the best that I can, even though it's not as helpful for me anymore as it used to be, you
mm,
know? And
right.
so, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people who are putting on the events seem to feel the same way of like, it's been so helpful for them and they want to share that with others and
Mm,
for those who it will be helpful with. And
mm,
so I don't know. You never really know what's going to happen. And I think even if it all comes crashing down tomorrow,
yeah.
um, it did what it needed to do, and there's enough beauty in it that it made it worthwhile.
Mm,
But there's always a part of you that would like to, um, yeah, see if it could, you know, help more people and you know keep going as long as it should go, if
yeah.
that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Um, do you have any questions or thoughts for me?
No, I don't think so. I've really enjoyed the questions that you've asked, and I've loved some of the yeah, some of the things that you've shared, and yeah, we've had a conversation before.
Yeah.
I still need to release that one.
Oh, that's
I've been
totally
very
okay.
yeah. You say I'm a YouTuber, but and that's technically true, but I'm very bad at uploading, so I'm not a very successful one by any measure. But
Oh,
yeah, no, it's fun to talk with people who have a similar experience,
yeah.
you know, and that love for media. And so, yeah, it's always just lovely to talk with you. And
Oh, likewise. I really enjoyed our chat.
yeah.
I have one last question and we'll wrap it up. Um, do you have any, excuse me, do you have any last thoughts or words of encouragement for other learners?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, just, I don't know, be patient.
Mm,
And like, just realize, like, you don't, I don't know. I think for me, just realizing you never stop learning, and that's a beautiful thing, um, is really helpful to like keep you going because it can really be there's that thing people talk about where you get so old and then you just get stuck in your ways and you stop learning. Maybe
mm,
that will be true for me, but I always think it doesn't have to be. And I like, even if you think that you're done learning, you never really are. And so yeah, just being patient with it and like, yeah, just finding the joy in all of it because that's or at least trying to find a way to find joy in all of it because
mm,
that's what makes it easier to learn
mm.
in like full stop. If you can find some way to have like a joy in it, that's what keeps you going.
Cool. Thank you very much, Cassidy, for coming on. I really
Sure.
appreciate it. I will try to have, hopefully, I'll get this out before your event. And if I do, if I'm successful, I will try to put the information in the video description for people to follow the link to.
Sure.
Um,
And if
thank,
not,
oh,
I can give you a link to like our mailing list or whatever. So if
oh, yeah,
people are interested in anything that we have further, because we do have sort of plans, but what will come, uh who knows, but
yeah,
we do have our event in the fall, so that this will definitely come out before then. So
yes,
just get there and that'll give you any updates about like what we're doing. And
all right,
yeah, if you have an estuary and would like support or need involved, yeah, you can reach out to us, and we're always happy to try to talk to as many people as we can and figure out what it is that people actually need. Because we, as much as we like doing this stuff and it's fun for us and we find it meaningful, we also want that to be shared by the people, you know, who are who we're hoping to help. as meaningful as it can be for you, it makes it more meaningful for us.
Cool. Thank you very, very much. And we'll call that a wrap.
Sounds
And
good.
and if I can get my mouse working, there we go. We'll call that a wrap, and we'll see you next time.
Okay.